gentlemen. My name is Chamil Edirmani, by profession I'm an engineer, Vice President of the Organization of Professional Association and the Chairman of the Seminars, Workshop and Programs Committee of the OPA. As the Organization of Professional Association of Sri Lanka, today we are conducting a very important seminar on impact of the budget on national economy way forward. So we are really delighted and deeply honored your presence here. Without further ado, let us now begin the proceedings by inviting the President of the OPA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jayanta Galaheva, President of the OPA, for the welcome speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chamil. President-elect Mr. Tisara De Silva, General Secretary Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe, Treasurer Mr. Darshana Vijayamanna, past presidents, distinguished guest speakers, members of the Executive Council, General Forum, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this post-budget seminar on impact of the budget on the national economy, the way forward, organized by the Organization of Professional Associations of Sri Lanka. I'm confident that the professionals gathered here today will find this an invaluable opportunity to deepen your understandings of the budget and the direction it sets for the future of the Sri Lankan economy. In his address of His Excellency the President stated that his key strategic objectives of this year is achieving a sustained economic growth. Rate is over 7% in the coming years. To realize this budget, he identifies participatory economy, higher productivity, innovation, and private sector driven investments, as well as the growth as a key drivers. The government aims to attract foreign investments through transparent, rule-based processes, while also integrating Sri Lanka into global value chains by strengthening exports and developing value-added industries. The importance of public-private partnerships, PPPs, the modernization of state-owned enterprises, transparent implementation of strategic infrastructure projects also he highlighted. In addition, the budget outlines several major priorities, including expanding export earning through diversifications, ensuring debt sustainability, strengthening the production economy, eliminating rural poverty, and advancing digital transformation. Moreover, it seeks to build upon the progress already made in macroeconomic stabilization, improved governance, and revenue-based fiscal consolidations. At a time when the Sri Lankan economy shows signs of recovery, yet continues to face significant challenges. The government has presented an ambitious budget aimed at placing the economy as a stronger, more resilient. Achieving those goals will require the collective commitment of all stakeholders, including professionals. It is essential, therefore, that we gain a comprehensive understanding of the budget so that we can play our part in supporting the nation's progress. We are honored to have today as our keynote speaker Dr. Harshana Suriyapperuma, Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, as someone who has played a significant role in the preparation of the budget. I know that he will have many valuable insights to share with us today. He will join in few minutes. In addition, it's our privilege to join by three distinguished guest speakers who will be able to shed further light on this important topic. Mr. J.P.R. Karunaratne, former Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Ms. Iyesha Asanthi, Commissioner of Tax, Policy and Legislation at the Department of Inland Revenue, and Dr. Nishan, Director of Verité Research. On behalf of the OPA, I would like to warmly welcome all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening and allowing us to benefit from your expertise and knowledge. The presentations of our distinguished guests will be followed by a Q&A session, during which you all have the opportunity to pose questions and gain further understandings of the budget and its implications. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you all are eager to hear from our esteemed speakers now. So without further delay, I will now hand over the proceedings to the moderator, Mr. Banu Vijayaratne. So wish you all an informative and enriching evening. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, President OPA, Mr. Jayanta Galeheva, President-elect Mr. Tisara De Silva, General Secretary Mr. Ravi Rupa Singha, and members of the head table, our guest speakers, the past presidents, the members of the Executive Council, and the members of the General Forum. So it's with pleasure that I stand here to make the introductory remark of this most important seminar. The OPA decided to have this seminar after the budget being presented to the Parliament by Honourable President and as the Minister of Finance. And this seminar will focus on not the budget highlights, but as to what impact this budget is going to make on our national economy. So that's the theme. We have had a couple of, seminars immediately after the budget. But the purpose of this seminar is to take you through the probable impact of this budget and to see how that's going to support or how that's going to affect the economy at large. But nevertheless, I thought it's appropriate to take you through some of the key features, key highlights of the budget, just to set the stage and set the tone for the topic today, seminar. I just glance through it. So budget at a glance, summary of the budget. 26 budget targets revenue of 5.3 billion, including 4.9 billion in taxes, against expenditure of 7.05 billion, resulting in a deficit of 1.75 billion. And this deficit is to be financed through 235 billion in foreign sources and 1.5 billion, 1,522 billion in domestic borrowings. So the Sri Lanka's progress towards economic recovery, Sri Lanka is recovering and is strengthening with the reserves surpassing $6 billion, reaching 15.9 of the GDP. The government expects to regain the pre-crisis stability by end of 2025. Very ambitious targets. Reflecting this progress, the world-renowned rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, S&P, have upgraded the ratings of Sri Lanka, and they have declared that Sri Lanka is nearing coming out of the crisis, and we are no more going to be considered as defaulters. So the GDP growth, government aims to achieve a sustained growth rate exceeding 7% within the next few years. The government debt, which stood at 114.2% of the GDP in 2022, is projected to decline to 96.8% by 2026 as a percentage of the GDP, with a further reduction to around 87% expected by 2030. So these are really very ambitious targets. So we need to see how this budget is supporting all these initiatives and the targets made by the government. So strategic objectives, this is focused on achieving sustainable growth, attracting foreign investment through transparent rule-based mechanisms, and integrating Sri Lanka into the global value chains. So the three priorities include strengthening the public-private partnership and the SMEs and modernizing state enterprises, SOEs, diversifying exports, ensuring debt sustainability with a 95% debt to GDP target by 2032. Looks a bit of a gigantic target, but we need to work towards it, without which we will have no kind of a mercy, because we need to pay the debt and then have our exports and the earnings increase to meet this level. So we need to see how best this budget is going to support all that. And also the budget proposes new laws and regulations to be enacted. Key measures include legislation on the public-private partnership. I think that act is to be enacted next year. Then state enterprise and asset management, the digital asset declaration system, and a code of ethics for the judicial officers. And the Port City and the Strategic Development Acts will be amended alongside the new rules for public and public asset oversight. So direct to indirect tax ratio, we have the commissioner here. I'm sure she will throw light on this subject. The government aims to gradually adjust the direct to indirect tax ratio from 25 to 75 to 40 to 60 to enhance the tax efficiency and equity. Strengthening exports, the government aims to achieve export diversification by introducing new tariff policy, improve necessary financial facilities for the promotion of new goods and services, exports, and establish a trade national single window, very important initiative. Eradication of rural poverty, the government aims to empower rural communities through a modern sustainable development program focused on expanding economic opportunities, improving infrastructure, promoting the productive economy, ensuring planned urbanization, and enhancing access to quality education and healthcare. Strengthening small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs are the key of the economy, so they have plans to improve and upgrade the SMEs through various credit schemes. And SMEs will be made more efficient by consolidating the functions of the Industrial Development Board, National Enterprise Development Authority, and the Medium-Sized Enterprises Development Board under the Industrial Development Board. That's a new initiative proposed by the government to bring them under one roof, so have some consolidation in order to support the SMEs. Economic sovereignty and food security, government is expecting to modernize the paddy processing, strengthen food storage, and expand irrigation to boost agricultural productivity. The public sector, the government aims to modernize the public service by merging or closing redundant institutions, improving efficiency, digitizing services, upgrading assets, and settling long overdue payments to restore accountability. Silver economy, Ministry of Rural Development, Social Security, and Community Empowerment to formulate policy to make senior citizens active stakeholders of the society. Promoting the blue economy, Sri Lanka aims to leverage its strategic location in the Indian Ocean to harness marine and coastal resources for sustainable economic growth and position itself as a regional hub for blue economy investments. Providing relief to Sri Lankans abroad, of course there are a couple of housing loan schemes that they are proposing in order to attract more inward remittances through them, and also to attract the people who have left the country back into Sri Lanka. Reverse migration, that there are certain activities or the functions that have been established through the budget. Then the logistics, government aims to strengthen Sri Lankan position as a regional logistical hub by expanding port and airport infrastructure, enhancing digitalization and automation, and promoting private-public partnership to improve efficiency, cargo handling, and overall operational capacity. So I just touched on certain key highlights of the budget. So we are going to have a Q&A and couple of presentations. Dr. Nishan will make a presentation, which will be followed by Dr. Harshana Suriyapperuma, who will join us shortly. Thereafter, there will be two brief presentations by the two other speakers, Mr. JPR Karunaratne and also Ms. Iyesha Asanthi from the Inland Revenue. So we will start the Q&A, and with the Q&A there will be a round of questions that we will be posing at these speakers, and thereafter the Q&A will be open to the House. So you all can make use of this opportunity to raise whatever the questions you have, to have further clarity on it. So, and let me conclude my introductory remark by wishing you a successful seminar. Thank you.
He is an expert in banking sector as well. For the introductory remarks, actually, Dr. Harshana Suriyapperuma, he told that he will be having a meeting with the HE President, so he will be joining us later in the evening. So let us turn into our speakers. We have the first speaker, who is a leading economist and the director of Verité Research. Dr. Nishan is the executive director and head of research of Verité Research, a think tank that provides analytical research and advisory services on economic, political, and legal issues in Sri Lanka and Asia. He is an economist with extensive academic, policy, and private sector experience. He has been a member of the Presidential Task Force on Health Sector Reform, Presidential Committee on Tobacco, Alcohol and Dangerous Drug Regulation, and the National Steering Committee on the Social Security of the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute, among others. Internationally, Nishan has held several governing, teaching, and research positions, including as lecturer in economics at the University of Oxford, UK. His undergraduate degree in economics is from Harvard University, USA. He earned his master's and doctoral degrees in economics at the University of Oxford, where he was a Chevening scholar. Sir, over to you. The floor is open.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the OPA, Mr. Jayantha Galheva, President-elect, Isra De Silva, office bearers of the OPA, members of the head table, and past presidents, and thank you so much for inviting me here today and for your interest. And I can see a very crowded room, which says that the budget still has interest to all of us. And I was really appreciating what Donald said earlier, but this is not just to tell you again, as you have seen in the media, highlights of the budget, but to really look at the larger economic situation and how we are progressing. So, my presentation today, which I must time just to make sure that we get through it, is in two parts. In the first section, I will really connect us with the larger economic dynamics. And I'll talk about the fiscal side, which is what the Treasury and government does, and that's the side that produces the budget. The monetary side, which is what the central bank is managing, and we have a deputy governor from the central bank here today as well. But also the real economy side, which is the side we are on, right? With the consequences on our lives and how people are actually kind of made better or worse off by what is going on. So it's very important, I think, that we look at the consequences on lives, and that's what we call the real economy when we look at the budget. The second part, I will look at the budget dynamics itself. So I will tell you some things about the budget, again, large handles that affect the economy. And I will look at some positive trends that we are seeing in the budgeting that is happening currently and looking to the future. I will also look at some problematic trends, okay, some problems that are in the budget, and offer some solutions of what we can do. I know the OPA does proposals or policy advice to the government, and I want you all to think about the solutions as things that you can take to government as well. Overall, I'm really glad to be presenting to a group of professionals. So I think we are going to take a professional eye when we talk about problems and solutions and the budget, because it's so important that the voice of professionals help to professionalize the way we manage the economy. It's the failure to be professional in economic management that got us in trouble. It is establishing or putting back the capacity for more professional management that will get us out of trouble, is how I think about it, okay? So, starting off with the larger economy, I want to first decide whether we are, just give me a second. Okay, excellent. So we'll start, as I said, as a fiscal real economy and the monetary side. On the fiscal recovery, indicators are positive, okay? I'll show you the large indicators. You can see here how in the red line that you're seeing, expenditure has been brought to a certain level. It was 22.1% of GDP in 2020. It has come to stable 20.5% of GDP in the last 3 years. But more than that, what's positive on the fiscal side is the way revenue as a percentage of GDP has gone up. So you can see that revenue fell at its worst in 2021 to 8.3% of GDP, making Sri Lanka one of the lowest revenue earning countries in the world, amongst the bottom 7 or 8 in the world for revenue to GDP. And it's gotten back to, it's slowly crept up, where we got to 16 last year. We overshot the targets. But that's how the revised projections are. But at least next year we're aiming for 15.4. So these are positive trends, and as a result, you can see that the budget deficit, we call it the budget balance, that you see on the bottom, that's a negative number, is getting less and less negative. So as it goes up, it gets less negative, right? So it's projected to be negative 5.1 next year. And of course, we need to get it to be in the range of 5% or less, and that's really what counts for stability, and we can see ourselves getting there. Now, even more impressive is what we've done with the primary balance. Now, what is the primary balance? Budget balance is just the deficit, the difference between revenue and expenditure. The primary balance is the difference between revenue and expenditure before you pay interest. Okay, before you pay all the interest that you have to pay on your debt. Now, primary balance, it turns out, is positive 2.5%. And it has been positive since 2023. Now, that's a record, because in the entire history of Sri Lanka, from 1948, independence history, when we started having central banks and things like that, you will see that we got primary balance into the positive territory up to 2000 only 4 times. Twice in 1950s, twice in 1990s. Then between 2015 to 19, it came close to positive about twice again. This is the longest running track record in the in the history since central banking started, where the primary balance has been in positive territory for 4 consecutive years, and it's also the largest primary balances we've seen in history. Even when they were positive, we don't normally see this 3.8 and 2.5, 15 to 19, they were barely positive. So this is a very, very impressive improvement in the side of what the Treasury is doing in terms of stabilizing and recovering the economy. I said it's not just what government does, it's what happens to people's lives. Now, when you look at the real economy, the real recovery, indicators are more sobering. Can't quite sing and dance about it so much because recovery seems to be coming more slowly. I'll give you some numbers that you should look at. Employment level, that is the level of people above the 15 years of age, that's how you measure it, to our working age, that have jobs, is at the lowest level in 20 years. Okay, it has declined, you can see the steep decline, and it effectively means to get back to the level that it was even in 2019. Now 2019 wasn't the highest, 2017 was the highest. But even to get to 2019 levels, we need to add another 700,000 jobs. That's how much we have declined. Now in the last this is for end of 2024, in the last 2-3 quarters, we probably added about 250,000 jobs, but long way to go to get to the jobs that have been lost, to put them back in the economy. When we look at women in the workforce, Sri Lanka has a very serious problem. In the prime working age even, that is 15 to 55 or 16 to 55, men are 2.5 or 2.2 times more likely to be employed than women. Women, only 40% of women have jobs, 41% even today, 90% of the men have jobs. So we have a very serious problem in our economy of making the economy conducive or attractive for women to contribute their labor, and we are a country that's doing worse than lots of other countries in that regard. So we are still struggling in that regard, but that's a continuing struggle. But when you look at real wages, there's been a lot of inflation, wages also have gone up, but when real wages is what you can buy with the money that you have, you notice that for the public sector it's worse. It's 78.7% of what it was in 2016. So if you're working in the public sector on average, your real wages have declined so much that your buying power today is only close to just under 80% of what you could buy with your wages in 2016. If you're in the private informal sector, there the base year is 2018, you're at close to 90% of 2018, you've still got poorer. Right? 10% poorer in the private informal sector, 20% poorer in the public sector with the wages that you have. And we have people in the public sector on our panel today, and we should thank them for continuing to do their jobs and serving the country despite the decline in real wages that they have suffered. Now, one of the most important indicators to look at and to be concerned about is poverty, right? Because not everybody has the same standard of living, and of course in Colombo we seem to be all right. But poverty numbers are extremely sobering. Right. Now, World Bank publishes a calculation of poverty. In that number, you can see from 2019, poverty has doubled. And these are the projections for 2027. So if you look at 2025 or 2024, you can see it's 24.5, 22.7 from 11.3 in 2019. So poverty has doubled. That's huge. Poverty has got so bad in our country in this debt crisis that no other country for which we have poverty data, and we have 11 episodes of debt restructuring, have created so much poverty as Sri Lanka has. So this is an example that you see of countries that went episodes of debt restructuring in the last 10 years. The country that did the worst was Mozambique, and it added 6.2 to poverty. The poverty went up by 6.2%. In Sri Lanka, poverty went up by 13.2%. So one of the things to understand about the way we have managed recovery from this crisis, we have passed down the pain to the bottom, which probably explains why we don't feel it so much at the top. Okay? When you realize that no other country restructuring debt in the last 10 years has had such a large impact in the similar crisis on poverty as experienced in Sri Lanka. Now we need to respond to poverty better, and that's one of the things I want you to remember and think about from this talk today. And one of the failures or problems in responding to poverty is that we are not even measuring it. Now this is a World Bank measure. When World Bank said in 2019 poverty was 11.3%, they use a different poverty measure that they can use globally. But Sri Lankan Department of Census and Statistics does an actual consumption power analysis, creates a basket of goods and a cutoff point for income, and publishes a poverty measure. When World Bank said 11.3 in 2019, our Department of Census and Statistics assessed it with large income and expenditure surveys to be 14.3%, because World Bank also does simulations. So if poverty, when World Bank said 11.3, it's 14.3. When the World Bank says it's 22.5, we are close to 30%. Right? So that's how much we have created poverty in this country. And the sad thing is that we haven't even remeasured and published a new poverty statistic since 2019. Normally we publish a new statistic every 3 years or maximum every 4 years, but 6 years down the road, with COVID, with economic crisis, with massive consequences of poverty, we have not been able to even measure our poverty, and the first step in responding well to poverty is to measure it. So I think one of the recommendations we do need to make to government is that we should seriously, even the surveys are there, understand, measure poverty so that we can respond to it better. I'll come to the last point I want to make in this section, which is on monetary policy. Now here, the performance I think is worrying. As you know, we passed a new central bank act which gave the central bank a singular mission, that is to target inflation. And to target inflation and keep it within a certain range. So this is why I say monetary policy performance is worrying, and the range that we give is published in a gazette notice, right, between the central bank and the Treasury. The central bank undertakes to keep inflation at 5%, and they're told, you have to get it to 5%, but we'll give you a little error margin, so you cannot go above 7 or below 3. This is critical, and if you go to the Bank of England, they have an error margin of 1%, not 2%. So we've given them a target and also given them a large error margin on the basis that they should get too close to the target. So sometimes it can be a little bit more, sometimes it can be a little bit less. Now for 6 quarters running, central bank has not only missed the target, but missed the error margin also. So 3% is the bottom error margin, and inflation has come out under 3% for 6 quarters running. Consistently, quarter after quarter, they will miss it the next quarter, and they will probably miss it the quarter after that also. So it will be 8 quarters running. Now, when you have an institution with a singular mission, that is, and a law that empowers them to fulfill it, I think it is, we need to really kind of find ways to assist the central bank to get that job done. Why are we so concerned? It's because when inflation is so low, unless you bring interest rates down with it, real interest rate, which is what accrues debt to the country, becomes very high. So the real interest rate is the difference between the nominal interest rate you see people paid and the inflation rate. And real interest rate in Sri Lanka is the highest you have seen in decades. Even on a 1-year treasury bill, it's over 9%. Actually, on government debt, it's in double digits. And that gets the country into debt difficulty. So one of the critical ways for debt sustainability is you bring real interest rates down over time. And that's why that inflation target is important, not only not letting inflation be too high, not letting inflation be too low, or if inflation comes lower, bringing interest rates lower accordingly. But actually interest rates are higher today by 2% than what's in the IMF's debt sustainability target as well. So real interest rates are really creating a problem, no pun intended, for the country. They're so high and have been over time also that Sri Lanka's revenue to interest cost, that means the interest we pay or divided by our revenue, the total revenue the government earned, went up to 80%, has come down to 60, they're expecting it to come down to 49 or 50, but it's the highest in the world. So there was, in 2024, so that's the latest data for all the countries, we had 65.8%, we were the highest in the world. But then Pakistan and Egypt were 61 and 55, so countries in crisis. Now Sri Lanka in 2026, we don't know other countries, is projecting 49.2%, but other countries also that are out of crisis will be lower. We will remain potentially the highest interest cost to revenue country in the world because we are not managing our interest cost and we are not managing our inflation in the right region as well. Because if inflation was more, nominal GDP will be high and revenue will be higher, etc. So here is a critical issue for our debt sustainability and also our reserves. You will see that many people think reserves have recovered, but if you measure like for like, because there's a Chinese swap that we can't actually use as reserves, and we talk about it often. If you subtract that from the reserves that are reported, our reserves are 4.8 billion US dollars. They were 7.6 billion US dollars without using swaps in 2019. Today we get to about 7 billion or 7.2 billion if we put the swaps in. But those swaps are not usable, they're not really reserves, they don't qualify under the IMF definition of reserves. So we do have some work to do on the monetary policy side. We have done rather well on the fiscal policy side. And what's happening is that the monetary misses are eroding our fiscal successes. So we are succeeding on the fiscal side, but that success is being eroded by the monetary side. And one of the debates we have today is really about capex, right? Why is government spending less in capital expenditure than budgeted? Well, this graph shows the reason. It's because our interest costs are going too high. You can see that when interest costs go up, capex goes down. It's almost a one-to-one, a Newtonian kind of reaction, equal and opposite. When interest costs go down, capex goes up. Government doesn't have the fiscal space to spend their capex because they're taking what can be spent in capex and using it to pay a bloated interest cost, which keeps coming out too high. And so if we are to manage investment, which we need for growth and capex, we need to manage our interest costs down, and that's the number one priority, I would say, for Sri Lanka's economic recovery. So you can see here, the green ones are what's happening on the fiscal side, they're all positive. The red ones are what's happening on the monetary side. They're all the negative gap, the actual is kind of failing. And in a way, we are okay because the fiscal side is overperforming, right? But in the past, we passed an act to give independence to the central bank because we were worried that the fiscal side was forcing the monetary side to print money, the overspending on the fiscal side. So we said the fiscal tail was wagging the monetary dog. Today we might be having the opposite situation where the monetary tail is wagging the fiscal dog and forcing government even to cut capex in order to manage its interest cost. Another lesson to take from here is that it's time to do another debt sustainability analysis. Now, if you look at the exchange rates that are projected in our debt sustainability analysis, they are in red, and the actual exchange rates are green, completely off the path of the DSA. I think one of the things that the Treasury Secretary, who will join us shortly, said before the elections was that the government elected would do another DSA, another debt sustainability analysis. And I think there were many critiques of his comment, not from Verité Research. We actually came and said, yes, of course you should do another DSA. It is, you mustn't drive without, with your eyes closed. We mustn't try to manage debt sustainability without having constantly updated debt sustainability analysis. And the debt sustainability analysis we're working on now is 4 years old. All of the data and all the performance is significantly out of date. And I think it is really a good time for the government to kind of do and publish a new debt sustainability analysis so that we know, we can understand and see the problems we are dealing with, and we can measure our actions to respond to the real problems, not an outdated analysis of the problems. So in my first part, I said, poverty has to be measured, and we have to really take serious account of poverty and how to reduce it. On this side, I will say that we need a new debt sustainability analysis and take serious note of how the trends are different from what was anticipated and how we need to respond to keep our debt sustainable. Because currently you need monetary and fiscal side to pull together to pull a sustainable economy. Currently they've been pulling in different directions, and we need to solve that. Okay. I'll get to my second part now, and I think I have another 10 minutes or so. And here I want to start with some positive trends I see in the budget and end with 4 problems I see in the budget that I think we should engage. On the positive trends in the budget, one of the things we see is that revenue has been exceeding budgeted projections. And honestly, perhaps for the first time, we've seen this in a very long time. Both in 24 and 25, and now going to 26 and 24, we are seeing that often what happens in Sri Lanka is you budget or project, say in the budget you say this is my revenue, actual revenue turns out to be much lower. And the one thing you could, or in the past, the one thing that you could predict for sure about a budget is that you will not achieve your revenue target. Okay, you knew that whatever was in the budget, we are going to do much lower than that. Now, for the first time, as far as I can remember and find data, Sri Lanka has changed that equation. We are getting more revenue than we projected in the budget. So that's quite impressive. And if I go close, you can see 2024, it exceeded revenue targets. 2025, it exceeded revenue targets. So 2 years running, and never before in history do you see that in the time we've looked at. Another really positive sign that we saw was that, again, for the first time in a long time, healthcare allocations, spending, has overtaken defense spending. Our defense spending has been too high, and what you can see here is that defense spending is gradually being managed downwards as a percentage of GDP, and healthcare spending is remaining about the same, but of course it was a little higher during COVID, but because defense spending is coming down, we have healthcare allocations actually now overtaking defense spending, which is a very positive trend again in the budget. One more thing that we saw was that when you looked at the budget proposals and we categorized them into major areas, the largest part of budget proposals went into social welfare, the second into infrastructure, and then everything else. So really the budget has prioritized social welfare and infrastructure in the set of proposals that have been put forward. I think just to understand what's happening to government revenue, there's a 2.8% increase in government revenue, and it's coming mainly through VAT and probably not through increasing the rate of VAT, but better administration, better collection measures. They've of course reduced the threshold for collecting VAT, But that's adding only a small amount to the increase in VAT. Most of it is coming really from the expected increase in nominal GDP. Okay, so coming to my final bit to talk about the problems in the budget. So these are positive trends. And these problems, I must say, are not new problems. They're old problems. They're problems we've seen in every budget, but we need to fix them as professionals. So this is the appeal to you as professionals, to get involved, to create more professional budgeting in the country. And if we are focused on more professional budgeting, we will engage these problems. You know, it's a funny thing, but budget proposals are not actually budgeted. Because to budget a proposal isn't the same as reading out in the budget speech and saying we are going to do ABC. What it means to budget a proposal is to allocate some amount of money for it, because otherwise it's just a manifesto or a promise. Now, every year we find large numbers of proposals that don't have money allocated in the budget. Or there is no, budget doesn't tell you how much money is allocated. So they're not actually budgeted, right? These are, and you can see that, you know, the interim budget of 2022, of course, that is a crisis budget, nothing had budget. Some years 67%, 49%, last year 23%, this year 25%. Of the proposals didn't have money allocated. We are ignoring any proposal that's just a change in laws or other things that we don't consider large spending, and looking at actual spending proposals or revenue changing proposals, and said, is there a monetary figure behind it? Is it budgeted? And we are finding that about 25% don't have a budget. And so here's what we think. Each proposal should have an estimate of budgetary impact. And that's a professional thing to ask in your companies, anywhere. You can't put up a budget, right? And say this cell is blank, how much money I expect to spend. Your CEOs and everybody, and you yourself expect to see how much are you spending. You can't put line items without amount, that's not a budget. But that's what's happening in Sri Lanka. And as professionals, we need to engage to say, let's make sure that the estimate of budgetary impact is given. Second, you know, proposals are often not analytically formulated. What do you mean by that? That is, a budget proposal is not just an idea I have in my head, or a concept, or a thought. Budget proposal is something that goes through deep analysis and thinking, what is substantial analysis and thinking. You say, what is the impact on society? What is the impact on the budget? Why is this important for the country? You think it through and you write a proposal, and you have some analytical basis for the budget. And in fact, even our laws say that you have to have a basis for the numbers you put up. But actually, in Sri Lanka, from the time I've been speaking, which is a long time, the government does not produce an analytical basis. So often these proposals don't succeed. They don't get implemented. When you try to implement, there are problems, and they fail. Suddenly you discover the money you thought is not enough. We run into all kinds of problems because if you're not actually putting an analysis. Analysis is a real plan, an understanding of some sort. It doesn't have to be very detailed, but it has to at least try to grapple with the realities of benefits and costs, and decide that this is of value. So we had at Verité something called the Budget Proposal Hub. And if you go there, you can download, you can use the QR code if you take a picture and look at it as well. You know, proposals where we are trying to model ways of doing it simply. 6 pages, 7 pages, 5 pages of analytical basis for budget proposals that we are presenting to government. And I think as professionals, even you are probably presenting to government proposals that have an analytical basis. There's a document that says why you should do this, and that document has good data, good research that is connected to it, and you're pointing out the benefits to the country, right? That's how you do a budget. And I think Sri Lanka needs to do the same. And so that's why we are saying that. So there are other problems in lacking that. Now, the last, so solutions for better budgeting is each proposal should be supported by economic justification. Okay, that's a professional thing to do. Third problem, inconsistent data in the budget. If you look at the budget estimates that are tabled in Parliament, that's where all the debates happen, that's where all the detailed numbers are there. And when you look at the budget speech, the numbers are not the same, sadly. There are substantially different numbers in the budget speech on various line items than there are in the budget proposals. So I'll give you an example. In the budget speech, non-tax revenue is 360 billion. In the budget estimates that now everybody is debating, non-tax revenue is 425 billion. Huge 15.3 difference in that. Now it's quite possible, and I think this is what happens, that somehow the estimates are put together earlier and before the budget, things get revised and updated. Because things are done a little bit last minute. Now that's okay, but at least then, there should be a reconciliation statement that comes to Parliament and say, look, these are the differences, this is why they are different. Just like when you have a budget and actuals that you report to in your company, you say this is the budget, these actuals, here's the variance, here's why. You have a reconciliation when you present to any set of professionals why there is a variance, and I think the variance is clear, the explanation is not, should be provided, and we say provide a financial reconciliation statement. Harshana has come in time, I think, to take over, so I'll end by telling the last problem that I saw in the budget. Just to make sure you understand, Harshana, we've talked about the economy, the fiscal side overperforming and the monetary side needing to follow the fiscal side, and the real economy really still struggling with high poverty to recover. We've talked about the positive trends in the budget, of which there were many, and some of the problems in the budget that are not new but have been there for a while. And I'm at my last and fourth problem, and solution also, which is the reduction in published information. You know, there are documents that come, there are kind of fiscal strategy and documents that undergird the budget that give you medium-term framework. And I just want to highlight that, you know, that information published in the fiscal strategy document 5 months ago are not published in the most recent document. Nominal GDP estimates are not given. The growth rate of nominal real GDP is not given. The deflator is not given. Primary expenditure percentage of GDP is not given. Now, I think this may be a one-off issue because the budget was still getting formulated, but it's so very important that the government adopts standards of publishing that make sure that important data is consistently published and made available. And I have a solution again. The easy way to do that is to adopt IMF standards on fiscal transparency. So, because IMF deals with lots of countries, they've adopted good practice standards on fiscal transparency, and Sri Lanka formally adopts those standards. So we do have laws actually that require some of this data to be published, so we can and should. But I think it's very useful to go further and adopt professional standards, so since we are speaking at a professional association, of transparency and publishing, and then we can also help ourselves to do better budgeting, better planning, and work towards better outcomes in the real economy. So here are the 4 problems. Budget proposals are not actually budgeted, there are no estimates. The analytical documents about how they are formulated there's no practice in government to do that. We can do that in the future. Inconsistent data in the budget and no reconciliation statement, and reduction in published information, which I think we can correct. So I feel positive that these are fixable problems, and that as we go forward, that the government can, I think, for me, this is the first time a government has embraced such a committed manner the idea that governance problems should be fixed. We've had people speaking about governance before, but when they're in power, they don't really follow through. I think in this particular transition, I think there's a lot of public confidence or sense that the government is committed to governance and committed to improving governance, and these are ways we can improve it also in the budget. Thank you very much.
Dr. Suriyapperuma is a distinguished finance professional and academic holding fellow memberships of CIMA UK and ACCA UK, an MBA from PIM University of Suriyapperuma, and a PhD from Management and Science University of Malaysia. He brings over 30 years of international experience across Africa, Australia, and Asia. Major bank initiatives, anti-money laundering, and counter-terrorism financing tasks at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Contributions to the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, the Statutory Accounting Standard Committee, Investment Management Company. He studied at Royal College, Colombo. Dr. Suriyapperuma was the Honorary Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning. Dr. Suriyapperuma currently serves as the Secretary to the Treasury and the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Over to you, sir.
Very good evening to all of you all. I wish I was here a little earlier to listen to the previous presentation provided by the eminent and well-respected professional in a session of this nature. I missed that one, but I'm sure a lot of learnings that you all, a lot of areas that was highlighted to you all for some thought-provoking engagements and discussions. First of all, from the representatives in of the head table, the fellow professionals, team members and colleagues who are here, to understand some of the aspects and the dynamics what went through when we prepared the budget and when we presented the budget. Sri Lanka is navigating through a tough period, and the credit goes to all the stakeholders who supported, who facilitated the journey up to now, particularly to the citizens of this country and businesses, SMEs, including professionals like you all for your contribution to make it possible. We have gone through many challenges, and the budget encapsulated some of those challenges that we had in the past, the present moment where we are in, and the direction to the future where we want to be. It focuses both immediate term and the medium term while paving the foundation for a long-term growth for the nation. The critical point through the budget is to resonate or to recapitalize on the confidence that the present administration has built during the past few months of its engagements. It has demonstrated, not just limited it to words and statements, but it has demonstrated the present government's ability, state officials' ability to maneuver, to navigate through tough times and to restore what we want, confidence. To give the message to everyone that it is possible. So the budget is a replication of those sentiments to people, to businesses, to investors, to foreigners, and to our creditors, that it is possible. And how did we do that one? There were 6 key strategies the budget was focusing on, including export diversification, inclusive growth, debt sustainability, the strengthening the production economy, eradicating rural poverty, and by promoting digitization. I think we would have seen different versions that was explained in the recent budget sessions. It would have been dissected by professionals and experts on those approaches that government is proposing to take this country forward to in our medium term, and to, as I mentioned earlier, to pave the way forward for the long-term growth of this nation. how did we plan to get the country from where it is now to these milestones that we have highlighted for the future? Message number one is consistency. If you look at the budget, we would see that government is marching on the direction while maintaining consistency in terms of taxation, in terms of the approaches that we have taken for debt creating the debt sustainability, in terms of opening up new opportunities. It is the approach of consistency, approach number one. Second is doing that one in consultation. Instead of taking a single-handed view, we conducted several discussions with the stakeholders. In one angle, with the state agencies, line ministries, government departments, but over 20 industry consultations with different segments of businesses. Let it be the tourism sector, manufacturing sector, you name it, agricultural sector, several forums where His Excellency the President himself attended to listen to the concerns of businesses, stakeholders and citizens. That is the second approach. As I mentioned, first one is consistency, second one is in consultation. So the budget is representing the aspirations of those consultations, of those stakeholders who participated. It is not the view of a single political hierarchy or a government Ministry of Finance or any other agency. It is the ambitions, vision and passion of citizens, state agencies, businesses and everyone alike. So the second important aspect is how we did it is through consultation. And the third approach is through those consultations, we understood to take this nation forward. We are limited to 65,000 square kilometers and 22 million in terms of population, whereas world is a much larger place. We want to move in to integrate Sri Lanka with the rest of the world, and therefore it is a must, it is imperative that we integrate with the rest of the world. That is where the trade facilitation is looked at as a key engagement in the 26 budget, where Cabinet has already appointed a high-level committee to look into expanding on the existing trade agreements and to look into new areas to enter into trade agreements with other nations also. Because in order to capitalize the opportunities presented by the world, we need to prepare ourselves. One of those strategies is to ensure we enter into, we look into the possibility of entering into trade agreements. If I look at the budget and try to describe it in one word, I would select the term growth as the focus of the budget. Economic stability has been established to a great extent in terms of how we want to look at it, how businesses want to look at it. Interest rates have been reduced, currency is stabilized, inflation is being contained. There are several measures that we can continue to elaborate. Our reserve position, despite the fact that we have opened up importation of motor vehicles, it is at a significant level. Obviously, we would like it to be higher, and many things are at play at the moment to secure those engagements. So the stability of the economy is created, and the sentiments of investors are reflected if you look at the Colombo Stock Exchange, if you look at the premiums that are paid for the instruments that are traded in the market, both local and overseas. When it comes to traded instruments, you can see the premium is coming down. What does that mean? As I mentioned earlier, it is a confidence. Country is on the right path. Those indexes, those premiums are indicating the country is on the right path. We have not reached the final destination, it's a journey. But the present moment, the administration, state officials and businesses, everyone is supporting it alike to get to the destination where we want to be. Why did I say that everyone is supporting? The fiscal consolidation, revenue that we have generated in the current year, those are historical numbers that we are achieving for the first time in Sri Lanka. IRD, customs, excise, all revenue agencies are exceeding their revenue targets. Month on month, one may say it is because of we opened up importation of motor vehicles, that is why the revenue is increased. That argument is true when you look at customs. But then what about inland revenue? That's why I say everyone is contributing. Citizens, businesses, they are paying the fair share of their dues back to the treasury. That shows the confidence. People who did not pay, did not contribute is coming forward. That's why we mentioned tax base has expanded by 300,000 new individuals entering into the tax base. We welcome those initiatives. How did we manage this? We used the same systems, premise system used by Inland Revenue, Asikuda system used by the customs. Excise department did not have a system. I'm sure we would have noted in the news, the system has been initiative we started to procure a system for excise department as well, a state-of-the-art system to be procured. Tender is awarded. It's a long-term engagement, but we are expecting hopeful results we will see in 2026 itself. Some of the modules will be available for us to use. So digitization, we use the same systems. Wherever there is a lacking, there is a vacuum, we are bringing in systems. So it's a collective effort. Businesses, citizens, good officials of state institutions, and the vision and the direction from the political authority. It is a collective effort. And obviously the contribution from professionals, well-wishers and supporters. Dr. Met has been supporting us, sharing his views numerous occasions with us. Wherever possible, whenever that is necessary, they have been contributing. So it is the collective effort that is supporting the forward march of this nation, for which we are thankful of. In this journey, I will address some of the areas highlighted by the previous speaker when I get to the latter part of my discussion, my speech. But for the time being, all this effort is to facilitate the businesses that you are engaging, consulting firms that you are working. We want you to be bigger, better, and more profitable in 2026 and beyond. That's why a foundation is laid to create that future. It is up to us, it is up to all of us to work together to create that future we deserve for this nation, for this country. This is why this is built on a foundation of zero tolerance for corruption. We explore the digitization to the maximum possible extent in this journey. We want to champion the story of governance to share to and tell the rest of the world that many agencies who did not have audited accounts available on a timely manner, now getting them to produce. I'm referring to SOEs. Many agencies, state SOEs, who had qualifications in their audited accounts. We want to address those, and many are coming clean now in their audit opinions. We want to continue that journey. Some of the entities who have not submitted their audited financials or did not have finalized management accounts for 5 years in one of the cases, all have been submitted there. I'm sure some of us may be aware that out of our significant number of SOEs, 52 of them have been identified as strategically important SOEs. I'm referring to those ones. Some of them did not have audited accounts that have been submitted for years. We have bridged that backlog. Accounts are now available. Auditor General's department is going through one at a time. So unless one is completed, we are unable to start the next set of accounts. However, the accounts are available. So that's those are improvements, one step at a time. But our expectation is by the time we get into the next financial years, those entities, all of them, will be able to submit their financials on a timely manner for auditing purposes. And some of the challenges which just to give you one example, one entity who is having a challenge to submit their next set of financials, we cleared one particular year that was in arrears. When we are trying to identify the next set, a major irregularity has been noted. So therefore those have to be now referred to the respective legislative authorities to inquire into them further. We are talking of large sums of money. So that is why some of the areas, even though we want to move faster, support them, push them to get into the next level, we discover some of these unfortunate scenarios. But we are determined as state officials, as government institutions, to support them to continue the journey. As I mentioned, zero tolerance for corruption, governance, transparency, accountability. Obviously, there were some gaps that we needed to address. That's why new legislations are being brought in, new laws are being drafted, or existing laws, amendments are brought in. Several of them were tabled in the parliament already. Some of them are in the making. I'll give some examples. The data sharing bill currently in the making, it is to make sure, since we are moving into the digital front, some of the government agencies are unable to share data with other government agencies because the respective laws does not provide them the flexibility to share data with the other government agencies. So those are being facilitated through these new legislations relating to sharing data with government agencies for us to continue our digital journey. Similarly, that's the umbrella law that we are looking at, or there are other modalities also that we are trying to review, whether to incorporate it under the digital ministries, new bills that are coming up through them, or to have a separate law. Similarly, investor protection law, it's another one to give the confidence to foreign investors, local investors alike, that their investments will not be haphazard manner be acquired by the government without due compensation given to them, without providing necessary explanations to them. So there's a fair and a justified process available. Similar pieces of legislation is available in some of the other countries, in parts of the world as well. We have reviewed them, modeled our based on those best practices available elsewhere, to see how through these engagements to provide confidence back into the world, to bring investments into Sri Lanka. This is why it is important for our agencies, BOI, Port City, and other agencies who are working to attract investments, the strategic development projects that we are looking at, to support them, to engage them, not only to invite them to come into Sri Lanka, but once they are here, we give assurance through legal means, through legislation, that their investments are safe in Sri Lanka. So it is beyond this statement, the protection is given under the law itself. So those are among some of the developments that we are preparing ourselves to. And at the same time, there were some discussions whether Sri Lanka is able to meet its obligations in terms of serving its debt. We have clearly demonstrated it's not that Sri Lanka is going to start repaying its debt in 2028. That is a myth. Sri Lanka is already paying its debt. 2024 we paid a significant amount, over $1 billion. 25 we have paid a significant amount, once again in billions of dollars. There are certain engagements, certain debt discharge that has to be done during these years as well. We have made them on a timely manner. And similarly, if you look at the requirements for 2028 compared to what we have paid in 2025, the increase is we consider it as only marginal. So therefore, we are very confident. The approach that we are taken, obviously it requires to continue us on the path of the financial discipline that has been brought into the system in two angles. One is to maximize the revenue side of it. Other one is to ensure expenditure is controlled in a manner that every rupee is spent with responsibility, because it is the taxpayers' money. So both angles are being looked at, and our cash flow management process approach that we have taken has helped the Treasury to manage its reserves very well. To date, we have utilized some of those savings to retire some of the local debt that is available in rupee terms. We are expecting those details to be made available to public shortly. And this engagement, this journey through that we are envisaging for the year 2026, it is not only this preparatory work. Some of these public investments are expected through some of the ministries. For example, Education Ministry will continue to invest in our human capital to make sure future generations are ready to take over this nation. That's why expenditure relating to healthcare sector, once again to make sure our citizens, our future generations are being well looked after. Similar investments in the transportation network to make sure connectivity is provided to all citizens in the country. It is the connectivity that helps to bring development and growth to the regional Sri Lanka. As I mentioned, one of the key strategies is to alleviate rural poverty. In order to do that one, we need to ensure connectivity is provided to the citizens in the country, for them to bring their produce into the markets, to ensure they will be able to get a better price by accessing better markets within the country itself. So because of that, as I mentioned, a lot of public investments is going into the road networks as well. Similarly, agriculture is a key component of the nation. So considerable amount is invested in the irrigation and maintenance and development of those networks as well. Similarly, drinking water, fisheries, the list will continue. Not only that, there are other areas that maybe one may consider as little unconventional. For example, development of domestic airports. We saw on the news we have exceeded the 2 million mark in terms of arrivals. We need to ensure adequate facilities are available to welcome high-spending tourists into the country. That's why, as I said, it is a mission and a vision to achieve. That's why the investments are provided into upgrading the domestic airport structure, allowing high spenders, wealthy tourists to come and enjoy Sri Lanka. Similarly, many of those the expectations or strategies that we are deploying is to ensure vulnerable communities are looked after, fair treatment, SME sector is provided adequate relief. Over 80 billion rupees of financing facilities is provided through the budget for SME sector. Those could be through able to borrow without collateral. In the current year 2025 alone, since the new establishment, the National Credit Guarantee Insurance Institution was set up, over 4 billion rupees worth of credit was disbursed to the market with zero collateral. So that journey will continue. So similarly, SME sector, women, empowering women, allowing startups, allowing youth to come into businesses, for them to give it a try. Instead of relying the single source of employment as government, we want new entrepreneurs looking into new areas beyond traditional areas. So a lot of facilitation through the budget to look after those segments as well. Not only SMEs, larger businesses once again, in order for them to continue on the trajectories that we are expecting. That's why I mentioned the free trade agreements are being looked at. That is to ensure new markets are opened up for them to thrive in their business activities that they do. So these engagements facilitated through a digital journey. I'm sure we would have noted less than 5,000 rupees of payments, the government will absorb the cost of those digital transactions. All government institutions will be made citizen engagements with them. When it comes to payments, there will be a digital window for making payments and transfers, and government will absorb those costs as well. So those are new items, and I saw in some of the articles that were circulating We have highlighted some of the budget lines. However, we might have not provided the relevant values in the budget. In one place I saw it was mentioned that the government's employees' salaries that we have provided. I'm sure in the 2025 budget, those details were very clearly presented. It is a plus or minus 330 billion that is expected. It is a 3-year commitment, 110 billion a year. So it was provided in 2025 budget. So once something is presented, it is the continuation from 25 to 26 to 27. So if we read the details, as I said, it is a continuation, then the details are available on those budgets as well. So states modernization of the government service is a very important item. Certain investments were not, or rather certain investment has not happened in the government sector. From easiest things such as obtaining IT infrastructure, laptops, computers, networking equipment, etc. From those basic to high level of data security related aspects, data centers, servers that we require, and other engagements and facilitation. So a lot of investment into modernize the government service. That is to provide a high quality service, faster engagement, and therefore it allows to reduce the time taken to provide a service. And as a result of these engagements, there are benefits. I'm sure we would have noted, President mentioned in the speech as well, corruption is a tax on people, on citizens. We have reduced that tax through the engagements and through initiatives that we have implemented. As a result, cost of doing business in Sri Lanka is coming down by the day, because cost of corruption is low, cost of financing is low. Because of high efficiency, we want to ensure doing business in Sri Lanka will be much easier. Our competitiveness for our businesses will be higher as we move forward. So those are some of the areas that we want to touch base on. I'm sure a longer time session for me to explain much of the details would be ideal, but those are some of the key highlights from the budget, how we tried and why we tried some of those engagements. And in our journey, transparency, sharing information was a key item. That is why I'm sure there are 9 booklets that were published and shared with the public. It is available digital versions online for anyone to download, from the budget speech to the citizens budget to the medium term debt strategy. Likewise, several details are made available. That is to make sure we share more and more information with public, not to have less information with public, but to give more information to equip you all better to understand that what government is doing, what government is expected to do. So this is a journey, as I mentioned, and I'm sure with our collective effort, with the support of you all, businesses, individuals and professionals, but by this type of engagements the OPA is arranging, we welcome these initiatives. We are thankful and grateful for the office bearers for arranging this type of engagements, to take this message to create the awareness. So we will continue that journey with everyone's support. I'm sure it is possible for us to achieve our ambitious target that we have laid in front of us. So once again, I thank you everyone and wishing you all the very best for the rest of the session's engagements. Thank you very much.
Karunaratne holds a Master of Commerce degree in Finance from the University of New South Wales, Australia, and a postgraduate diploma in Applied Statistics and a Bachelor of Science, Physical Science degree with a first class from the University of Colombo. He is a fellow member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, UK, and a Chartered Global Management Accountant, CGMA. Further, he is an associate member of the CMA Sri Lanka. Next, I will introduce Ms. Iyesha Asanthi, currently serves as the Commissioner of the Tax Policy and Legislation Unit at the Department of Inland Revenue. She has several key leadership positions, including Commissioner of the Upper Corporate Unit, the International and Trade Transfer Pricing Unit, the Large Taxpayers Investigation Unit, and the Human Resource Development Unit. Invite Mr. Banu Vijayaratne to moderate the session here.
We have grown, but it has generated other areas also in the interest of time. What kind of plans are there in the budget to attract FDIs? Of course, we see the proposals are there. What type of solid proposals and methodologies available in the budget to attract FDIs? I would like to hear from you on that.
Thank you very much. I suppose I'll start from the FDI side and then I'll get into the growth followed by that. For FDI to flow into a country, one of the key aspects, I'm sure tax incentives are important, but there are three levels of stability that investors are looking at. One is political stability, other one is economic stability, and the third component is on the social stability. Sri Lanka did not have many of these ingredients in the past, whereas now the present situation is the political stability is available and the economic stability based on the way how the plans are being carried out and implemented, the stability is being created and the society is at peace and at rest. Therefore, that gives and that acts as an impetus for foreigners and investors to look at a country in the first place. Otherwise, the type of investors that we got in the past is not necessarily the type of investors sometimes who would have looked at Sri Lanka. Because of the three ingredients that I mentioned and the type of governance framework that we are championing, we are expecting we will get brands, businesses who have not looked at in Sri Lanka in the past to come into Sri Lanka. We can see intense discussions and negotiations are going on as of now through the BOI, through Port City, and through various other engagements for existing businesses who have invested in the country, for them to increase their investments in Sri Lanka. So through that mechanism, it allows FDIs to come into the country. It could be partly through equity means and partly through borrowed financing also. So we are very hopeful. It is a journey. Investments, major decisions, it's not overnight, it takes time. Investors are looking at whether are we delivering what we have promised, and I suppose that 12 months window provides a good opportunity for them to get a good view of how the country is being managed as of now. So through these collective engagements, in one angle, it's supposed FDI flows to come in. Second one, as I mentioned during my speech as well, the efficiency of getting things done is also helping. That will reduce the cost of doing business in Sri Lanka. So through these engagements, we are expecting FDIs will flow into the country. I think the current year numbers were made available through the parliament and through subsequent representations also. That's a promising start. Compared to 2024, that's a very good achievement for the country. Then, in order to support the exports, as you mentioned, there are larger exporters, medium scale exporters, and the smaller scale exporters, and obviously people who are yet to become exporters. So there's a roadmap and an implementation of those activities in the roadmap to support larger exporters for them to grow, making finances available to them within a shorter period of time, faster approach in terms of clearance, certification. Many of the existing exporters who are having challenges to obtain export certification, there are processes at work to improve the existing efficiency levels for them to get those certifications quickly. Just to give some example, national single window for trade facilitation, something we have spoken about for decades but not delivered. So that is getting delivered as we speak. It's a 3-year project. First year has been completed now. Resources have been allocated, appointments have been made, and we can see it is happening. So that is getting delivered. So through those engagements, we are very hopeful exports will see new heights for the first time, breaking historical records that we had as a nation in terms of our exports. This year will be one of those examples. 2025, we are going to reach some milestone achievements. 26 will be even better and bigger. So our expectation is based on the plans at play, plans are in operation, and the way how it is being followed up and implemented, we are very hopeful the FDIs as well as exports will contribute to the 7% medium-term to long-term GDP growth that we are projecting, and we are very hopeful we should be able to realize.
Thanks, Doctor. Just another connecting question. Now, what's your opinion about the capacity of the state machinery to implement these proposals? Because it's quite evident from the last year's allocation, there are a large amount of capex had not been utilized, capital expenditure allocation had not been utilized. And in this year, the plans are very ambitious. So what's your genuine candid opinion as to the capability and the capacity of the government machinery to implement these proposals in order to meet these proposed targets?
Once again, in 2025, you all know the budget, the current year's budget was presented for a shorter period of time at the end of the first quarter. So we had about 9 months state agencies had for implementation, followed by the second election that came right after that with our additional challenges. So actually the number of months available for implementation was relatively low compared to other years. But if you look at the capital implementation, I had some statistics, let me see whether I can recall them. If you look at even in the previous years for implementation, in several previous years, the capex percentages have been relatively low, but that's not to find comfort. I have the data. By the end of October, let's look at month of September 1st. In 2019, capex was only 47%. 2020, capex was 29%. 21, capex was 25%. These are actual implementation numbers. Since you mentioned this year is low. In 2022, it was 32%. End of third quarter. In 23, it was 30%. In 24, it was 31%. Whereas 2025, it is 35%. So you can see 2025 has performed better than 24, 23, 22, 21, 2020, except for the year of 2019. So that shows the mechanism has started working. If you look at October numbers are even better. 2025 end, actual capex is over 45% in terms of implementation. And we are hopeful, this is to give you some confidence. In 2024, capex was 36% at the end of October, whereas this year it is 45%, despite it has lesser number of months for implementation. But as I mentioned, it is not to find comfort in the numbers itself. It is our responsibility as state officials to make sure 100% is delivered, or as much as possible is delivered. How are we planning to do it as we move forward? As I mentioned, the modernization of the state engine is one of the key objectives. That's why a lot of investments to build capacity, train state officials, make necessary investments, capex and otherwise, to ensure next year we will be able to achieve some of the highest numbers that Sri Lanka has ever seen. So obviously it is yet to be showcased and delivered, but our expectation is through close monitoring and supervision, we should be able to do better in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. My next question goes to Mr. Karunaratne. Since you are from Central Bank and represent the banking sector, present the banks are disbursing around 200 billion monthly and pumping money to the market by way of credit. so which has reached nearly 1.4 trillion in terms of a cumulative number. But the problem is the banks are burdened with some very toxic assets as a result of the economic crisis and the debacle. The credit growth rate at present is about 4.8, whereas the economic growth is around 3.5%. So, what's your view, Mr. Karunaratne, when the economic growth is low and the credit growth is high? In fact, the credit growth had been very excessive in the past, and the government budget proposes to grant more credit, so the credit growth should technically go up. So in this scenario, what's your opinion as to how the bank should balance this? That's a real imbalance. You give a lot of credit, but the economy does not grow in the same pace. So what's your view, and what type of a remediation the bank is available for banks to manage, because the banks need to take care of the customer deposits on which the lending is done.
I think, Manu, now if you look at the numbers, you see a significant growth only since beginning of this year. As at July, the credit growth has been for the banking sector around 20%. And of course, the NBFI sector, the finance company, it has gone up to about 35%, right? So if you look at the economy, running from 2020, we were in a under COVID scenario, so the economy is not growing. And again, coupled with 2022 crisis, again credit has not gone, and we saw large number of SMEs were in trouble, and huge number of NPLs. So since beginning 23, of course, coupled with the high interest rate scenario, along with the high inflation in 2022. Since 2023 only, the inflation started coming down. Of course, I think in line with the target numbers, but of course, I think Nishan said, it is below the target, 5%. Of course, it has been negative for 11 consecutive months, and it started picking up in the positive territory only in July, and it's 2.1%. So naturally, with the inflation coming down, the interest rates also came up significantly, despite the chance again, the criticism on the high real interest rate. The overnight policy rate is 7.75, and cold money rates are around 7.85 range. And government security rates have come down, both bills and bonds. And the PLR is also around 8.5 level, and other loan rates have come down. So along with that, people tend to move for credit. The question is whether the credit is for real productive purposes or for something else. But if you look at the numbers, the growth in numbers recent past, of course, one factor could be the opening of importation of vehicles, along with naturally people used to borrow either through leasing or term loans or whatever it called to finance their imports. So in the case of the finance companies sector, that may be the case. But if you look at the banking sector, still there's a substantial portion going for the other sectors as well. So for your question, the risk arises mainly if the majority of credit is going for the consumption, and also other owning and other related sectors. But I don't think in the banking sector the major portion is going for consumption alone. There are a number picking, even construction, manufacturing, and so many others, exports. So number is picking up. So with that, definitely the probability of business failure is very small, and also the all SMEs are in a recovery path. So basically, I don't see any problem of future NPL increasing, right? And also banks have adequately provided during the past couple of years for those provisioning. and also the industry's got the comfort of the concessions granted through various, facilities by the government as well as central bank. So that now the business has started and business is picking up. So, of course, we have to be mindful about the growth, because if you look at 20% and 35% in a normal circumstances, it would be significant more in data. But the economy has just picked up, so you need to pass credit into the economy. Otherwise, as you know, if we are expecting a growth, again, the credit is not moving, I don't think that's a realistic scenario. But only thing is we have to be cautious about to what sectors credit is moving and whether those sectors are the sectors which are performing right now as well as going to perform well in the future. So of course, from the central bank point of view, the central bank also has many tools. For example, I don't know because I just retired, so I am not going to make any comment on behalf of central bank. Here is my personal comments. Now, suddenly, just before, I think almost with the budget day, there was LTV imposed. Again, LTV reduced. So probably there are macroprudential tools available for the central bank, and also under the new Central Bank Act, central bank is the macroprudential authority. So where there are, number of tools available to curtail any potential risk for credit growth or anything else. So probably LT would have been, imposed. I don't know. My understanding is to looking at this to curtail credit, but I don't think it's. We have to be, too much careful about the credit. It needs to go, right? But there were periods in the past. Now, for example, yes, I can remember the period where after the ending of the war in 2009, around 2011-12, there was significant credit growth. At that time, I think there's a tool of credit ceiling was imposed on that. But we felt that it was too much. So my understanding is I don't think it should be too much worried at this moment. But of course, if the central bank feels that credit is moving, in a direction which will be harmful, and with the potential risk, probably they can manage it with the appropriate macroprudential tools.
Thanks, Mr. Karunaratne. Let me ask you a further question on it. Now, it relates to the credit mix, credit growth, the mix of credit that we granted. Recently, Central Bank announced that the major portion of the bank's sizable component comes from the bonding portfolio. So, which suggests that people use their jewelry in order to create money, probably maybe for consumption purposes. There are no clear kind of survey done as to what type of purposes this bonding is done. But we can reasonably assume that it is taken for consumption purposes, and also the fact that the poverty levels have drastically gone down. So that's isn't it a concern? And on the other hand, there seems to be certain lack of acceptance in doing sign-ups for the new restructuring. Various concession rates have been provided, concession terms have been provided, but still we observe that there's a little bit of a reluctance of certain customers to do sign-up for new restructured facilities. What can we do? Because still the total NPA in the banking sector is around 11%. It is one of the world highest NPAs as far as I know. So what type of remediations are available? How can we control this, or how can we address this issue? And I would like to hear from Dr. Dylan as well, and also from Dr. Mr. Karunaratne.
Okay, now since you mentioned about the pawning, the only problem is when you say pawning, the categorization is very difficult. Now, many use pawning as a borrowing method, but not necessarily for consumption. But even the farmers, for their day-to-day agriculture need, this is the easiest way of borrowing from the bank or any other financial institution. So I don't think when you see the pawning numbers, of course there is an increase, but we should not be worried about it purely from the point of view consumption. There may be a part going to productive sectors as well, right? But then, even though central bank does not have any LTV like for the motor vehicles, but there are implied LTVs. For example, there are guidelines issued by the central bank curtailing credit to certain levels. For example, there is a number called 70%, right? So those are guidelines. But on any entity granting any owning facility top of 70% subject to additional capital adequacy component. In the case of finance company sector, if any entity granting owning facility above 7% LTV, as per under the guidelines, need to provide 100% capital charge. So based on the balance part, they have to provide 100% capital. So the banks have a hit on their capital adequacy ratio. In the banking sector, this is about 20%, right? But of course, if the central bank feels, the owning sector credit is growing, probably it may come up with a, sort of a direction, right? Direction which, like the LTVs for the, motor vehicles, where still they can use that mode to curtail the credit going to the owning. But important fact is, all owning is not purely for consumption. There's a sizable portion going to other sectors as well. But the problem here in the case of, I think, I'm also representing the bank, banks love for collateral-based lending. The major concern is that, right? In Sri Lankan context, banks love for collateral-based lending. Even a very highly rated customer comes for a bank, bank would love for collateral, despite the cash flows are very, lucrative. So that is the concern. So I don't think owning will be a problem at the moment, but need to be careful. But the problem now is the volatility of the gold prices. That is that now to have their own discipline to provide the right level of credit. So if you look at maybe a month ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, it went up to, in Sri Lankan context, 400,000, and then again has come down below 300. So there's a significant volatility. So the banks themselves need to be mindful about that and ensure that they will pitch at the right level when they grant the credit. Then your second question about Man, what is your second question?
Second question what I asked is now when the credit growth happens this way, right? Banks have, of course, as you say, a lot of buffers and capital required and all that. But from a coming out of the bank's perspective, looking at from a socio-economic angle, right? So when the NPAs are rising up to that level, and there's a reluctance by the certain borrowers who are holding assets in banks to do sign-ups. Like however much you consult them, however much you reach out to them, consider and restructure it, whatever it is. There's a reluctance for them to do sign-ups. So what type of, that question I would like Dr. Diman to answer. So how can we make them to realize that there is a duty on their part to pay the loans that they have borrowed? And what type of action that we can put in place? Because overall, whatever said and done, the banks will not crash because there are lots of buffers and regulatory requirements and covers are there. But anyways, the customer deposit, so whatever the NPAs, when the NPAs are going up, it will definitely reduce the bank's capacity to lend because there's a triple effect when there's NPA rising up.
Let me answer some of the probably Dr. can take up hereafter. But if you look at the NPA numbers over the past few years, it has come down. As you said, NPA has come down to around 11% region gradually. But look at the situation in 2020. Since March, end of March, no one was paid. Everybody was under a moratorium, right? So naturally, in Sri Lankan context, even those who are willing to pay, use that facility. That's the nature. So if we have opportunity through moratorium to get that, they definitely use it. Not because you are not able to pay, but it's a natural benefit you are getting because they have a lot of payables. So, especially on the SMEs, there were a number of moratoriums which continued till end 2023, even some went up till June this year, continually expanded. So the most good clients use that opportunity to restructure their facilities. If you look at the numbers, banks also do not want those NPLs to go 100% bad and write off. They will not take any from the balance sheet. And also good customers also need to be mindful about their future strength for obtaining facilities. So basically, if you look at any facility, anybody who is not willing to sign up is a real, customer who is not going to perform well in the future, definitely. Otherwise, genuine customers, as per the information we have already reached banks, all the finance companies, and already restructured their facilities. And also banks have been fully supportive. Even if the circular issued in December allowed even some customers' facility to be restructured over a period of 10 years. 10 years. Efficiently and profitably, definitely would have signed up and restructured their facilities. So I rather don't understand anybody who is not willing to sign up and restructure. Definitely it's going to be a fail, business.
So it's a psychological effect, and that's why those who could pay also came in for moratorium. Their income levels were not disturbed at all. They also came and asked for moratorium. It's a kind of some kind of psychological effect in the mind.
Their money. So that is the price. It's a balance between the depositors' monies and the, borrowers who obtain the facility. So you have to be mindful about that as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to step out for about 40 minutes in 12 minutes or so. I apologize about that. But I think I don't have a lot to add to Mr. Karunaratne, what Mr. Karunaratne is saying. NPLs were crazy high. They have come down. Banks had buffers. That's also correct. But one suggestion we've had consistently to deal with this problem is to create what you call a bad bank. And there have been actually proposals to do that in the past. We haven't taken the step. So in crisis situations, what you do is the government supports an initiative by the banks themselves to create one entity that collects all the non-performing assets, takes it out of the balance sheets of the banks, and is able then to do a professional recovery process on them, and kind of put the loss in one institution that actually then gets funded through the banks also. So clean up the bank balance sheets and enable the banks to continue growing. So this concept of a bad bank is well known. I think we really should investigate that. Credit is, I think, I again agree, not overheating, because when you look at credit to the private sector, it's close to 30% of GDP right now. We've had times when it's about 40. So really it means that this is also about a recovery, and there's less credit to the government. The government credit is coming down. So there is room for private sector credit to grow, and I don't interpret it as overheating. And the market, let's say the equity markets are saying the banks are doing well, valuations have gone up 30, 40, 50, commercial banks 70%, I think, in the last 1 year, suggesting that, overall, the banks, this idea that banks were, in deep trouble, exit trouble may not be the evaluation we need to have. So now I want to tell you that
Thank you.
is reason for optimism.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
the fact that you need to.
Just to add, I think it's a good point. I think Nishan mentioned about the mix of public sector and private sector credit. Now the public sector credit is coming down, and it will further come. I saw in the budget proposals also. I think probably Dr. Suriyapperuma can tell. There were a lot of guarantees given for the borrowings of the public state sector entities. So they are going to settle all those. So with that, the number will further come down. So definitely the credit for the private sector is going up. So the mix has changed. There was a time that, credit means including the government securities. So if you look at, the number was very high for the public sector. So now it's changing. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's definitely a good sign. And just because that you moving out for a short while. Before that, I would like to answer on this question. What's your view about the robustness of the budget in terms of coverage, which is aimed at the projected growth in the national economy? I think you made in your presentation,
Sure.
you made a couple
Yeah.
of remarks. Just a quick short answer.
I think my short answer is that, while agreeing with everything our Treasury Secretary, Dr. Suriyapperuma has said, the export side, I think we need to keep thinking about strategic ways in which we increase exports. And he mentioned trade facilitation, which I think is extremely important, but I think there are two more things. One is, Sri Lanka can't grow exporting the same things we've been exporting for the last 40 years. Garments, rubber, tea, these are not growth areas for us. So we have to look at diversifying and look, since the garment sector came up in the 80s and 90s, there is no other sector that has become an export driver for the country. So figuring out and funding and supporting our export drivers, and that requires also creating sort of zones that are better supported, export processing zones, even creating private-public partnerships, giving them the infrastructure. So there's a lot of investment needed to do that, which I think the government has in some cases flagged also. But secondly, we can't grow exporting to the same markets. You've heard, Subhashini Abesinger from Verité Research say this umpteen times, that we have, if you're doing different products, we have to also go to different markets with different products. Asia is enormously an opportunity, and Sri Lanka needs to figure out how it grows its exports in the Asian market and exports different things and join the value chains that exist. So I think it's correct to think that exports won't come only, we will recover because the domestic economy went negative 10%, we'll get that back. And we'll get it back by somewhere by the middle of 2026. But if we are to really start growing, we have to unlock the capacity for exports not to be 10% of GDP, but to be 30, 40% of GDP. And I think that will require some fresh thinking and fairly systematic planning and involvement of the government also.
Thank you. Just before you leave, I would want to miss this opportunity to ask you. Now, under law reforms, there's a new act, Public Finance Management Act, and the draft PPP Act. So, what's your view of how this act would contribute towards our growth objectives, and also whether isn't there a kind of a overlapping between these two? I would like Harshana to touch on it.
I'm happy for Harshana to go first, but I can also, but maybe if I, yeah, go ahead.
So both of these pieces of legislation, PFMA Act that is in force already, 24 end, has provided a basis to ensure financial discipline is exercised in a manner that will safeguard the interest of public and obviously state institutions to act on those within those parameters. And the end result is prudent treasury management, prudent financial management that will yield better outcome. I think we heard that public sector, or rather government's borrowing, has reduced. So this is the yield and the outcome of better treasury management in the recent past that has allowed us to stay away from excessive borrowing from the market. And there are obviously limitations, the way how we issue treasury guarantees for SOEs when they are borrowing. In the past it was offered without any basis in some of the cases, whereas now it is reviewed, analyzed whether there is ability of the respective borrowing agency to repay those debts. If somebody is going to borrow in foreign currency, are there foreign currency earnings in the first place before exposing themselves unnecessarily? So there's a lot of checks and balance built into the process. So we are very optimistic based on those measures that have been brought in by this new legislation. Similarly, you sought some clarity about the PPP relating to and whether there's any overlaps. So once again, the PFMA Act specifically mentioned it is the PPP also will be subjected to the guidelines or the regulatory requirements and the requirements of the Act when it comes to PPP as well. That's why I think if we pay attention to some of the way how budget allocations are provided, PIP process, PIC process, I'll explain. So instead of asking to implement a project, suddenly you need 10 billion rupees. Now it has to go through a structured process, public investment program process, that's the PIP process. The respective ministries have to submit an application. It has to be reviewed in terms of its readiness, in terms of its feasibility, in terms of its economic value addition to the society and to the country, etc. So a lot of checks and balances and mechanisms have been built into those processes. So PIP will also go through similar process. But at the same time, we need to be mindful not to have too much of regulation that is going to burden the economic growth that the country is going to see in the future. That taking off has to be facilitated. So that's where the processes has to be in place, but it has to be provided with sufficient and well lubricated approach in terms of efficiency, in terms of implementation. There may be here and there overlaps. That's why regulations are built within those parameters to ensure those are ironed out. That's the initial response. Thank you.
One comment about the Public Finance Management Act that I think is quite critical. Obviously, this act we think is in many ways an improvement on the Public Finance Management Act we had before, with which we didn't comply incidentally, which got us into trouble. But there is one critical weakness, and that is that the current Public Finance Management Act puts a ceiling on primary expenditure to 13%, 13% of GDP. Now, there is not a single country in the world that has by law today constrained their primary expenditure to 13% of GDP. Even countries that constrain primary expenditure as a percentage of GDP constrain it to numbers above 20%. And very few have that constraint. They constrain primary balance. 13% primary expenditure puts us amongst the bottom kind of 10 or 7, 8 countries in the world, and those are not well-performing countries. If you want to grow, you have to have the ability for your government to make good expenditure and wise investments. And I think that that constraint, as an economist, I must say, we think it is a serious mistake. It doesn't make economic sense. But it doesn't bite us right now because our interest costs are so high and we want to contain total expenditure. So we are not spending more than 13% of GDP anyway, but we will have to remove this, especially as we increase revenue. Our revenue targets at 15.4 are still low because if you take India, our neighbor, a poorer neighbor, has almost 20% in total government revenue that they do through regional and national governments. And Sri Lanka can certainly get to 20% as we implement sensibly, not consumption taxes, but proper income taxes. Our income tax filing is still lower than the total number of files than it was in 2019. And the government has actually, based on a publication we did, issued some time ago a directive that all professionals must have an income tax file or a TIN number. So since I am at OPA, I want to ask you, and I have asked this at every professional association and some have made commitments, that you as an organization will ask all your associations to commit to making sure that when people are renewing their registration in the professional association, that the TIN number must be produced. This is not something that I'm asking only for Sri Lanka. India does it. Not just the TIN number, your tax file you must have a tax file in India. So I think in places like this, if you have to support the anti-corruption drive, the responsible citizenship and taxpayer drive, we must show the way as professionals and say that in our associations, you cannot renew your registration unless you show your income tax file or at least your TIN number. And this is a very good way to actually improve income tax collection and set the model for the country and enable our consumption taxes to come down, which then helps the poorer people in the country, right? Because poorer people spend a much larger proportion of their income to consume. So effectively, consumption tax charges the poor a larger portion of their income, and the rich a lesser portion, because the rich save more and our real interest rates are high. So we need to shift that balance, I think, and I do want to suggest that, and I think the government, we have a budget proposal to government, should in the next year revise that Public Finance Management Act to replace the 13% of GDP expenditure ceiling with a primary balance target of say 2% or whatever they'd like to do, so that when revenue grows, you can take that extra revenue and spend it on good things, on healthcare, on education, on infrastructure, on social support, all of which are needed in Sri Lanka. But at the same time, I think we need to get the revenue to grow. And I think that's where I want to encourage professional associations to put up their hands and say, we will actually find, we won't wait to be forced or for the hammer of the law to come down on us. We will take initiatives to create that possibility. In Kenya, in India, several countries, this is done by law sometimes. Professional associations are not allowed to. So do you really want to wait till the government does that? Or act voluntarily, I think, to have a better outcome. I think I may have to exit, and I don't think I have to be out for a little over half an hour, but I will join you later, I think, in the discussions and dinner.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Arrival back. So may I now reach out to Dr. Miss Iyesha Asanthi, sorry to have kept you waiting all this time back. In order to...
Mr. Banu, I may have interrupted you since Dr. Nishan is leaving.
No, he'll come back. What plans are there to expand the tax net instead of deepening it? One. So number two, why not treat the revenue, make it compulsory for the middle-sized businessmen to register them for VAT? It's not happening. Right? Maybe the regulations are there, but it's not happening. How do you make it a ground reality, so that itself will help to have the tax rather than deepening it is a real burden on certain taxpayers.
Thank you for the question. And first of all, I would like to thank OPA for inviting official of the Department of Revenue to this important forum. We have taken several steps in the previous years also to broaden the tax rate. With this budget 2026, one proposal is relevant for this enhance the tax net is reducing the VAT and SSCL threshold. Prevailing registration threshold is 60 million per annum. It has been reduced to 36 million rupees per annum. So with this proposal, it is expected to enhance the tax net while registering more taxpayers for the value-added tax and social security contribution levy. And another proposal is introducing e-invoicing system. With proper e-invoicing system, it has been proposed to be completed in several places. Pilot project has been implemented with connecting private selected companies, ERP system and the RAMIS. As per RAMIS official, it has been completed around 80%. The other places will be implemented in the next year. And in the third place, it is expected to connect with the POS machine, point of sale machines. And with this proposal, it is expected to enhance the compliance and as well as the efficient and transparent value-added tax system through web-based API system. And another proposal is to enhance the tax net, is introducing modern tax audit scheme. It is mentioned as risk-based audit scheme. So this based on the risk criteria developed by the risk management unit, new audit scheme will be introduced. So with the new audit scheme also, we hope to catch the persons who are liable for the tax, but who are evading the tax liability. And with this modern method, we will hope to implement the catch the more taxpayers for the tax net. And another proposal is in the budget is anti-money laundering and terrorist financing network. It is new for the Sri Lanka, but it is very important thing that national risk assessment is analyzing with the stakeholders of the government agencies. Main revenue agencies such as Inland Revenue, Custom and Excises are the stakeholders of this company. And as a step of this anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, Inland Revenue has implemented new criminal investigation unit. And with this implementation, we are going to have going to take prosecution for the tax evaders. That prosecution process will be taken by the Justice Department. And this year we have started 2 cases and handed over to the prosecution. And this with this budget, it is proposed to extend this criminal investigation to the indirect tax also. With this proposal, actually, with this implementation of criminal investigation, we don't want to harass the taxpayers, but we expecting their voluntary compliance without coming into this criminal procedures. So we are expecting more taxpayers to bring and to come voluntary to the tax net with these proposals.
Thank you very much, Ms. Iyesha. Now that you mentioned about the investigatory regime, is tax evasion a predicate offence in Sri Lanka? It was not.
Tax evasion is predicate offence in Sri Lanka under the Inland Revenue Act. It's under the section 186. This is predicate offence. But for the indirect tax, that legislation is not implemented yet. Within next year, it will be implemented with the guidance of the IRS.
So just a quick answer to now, certain exporters were previously operating on temporary registration, now that it has been made permanent requirement. What are the implications with the permanent registration for that?
That amendment has already introduced that if anybody imports or doing imports or exports for business purposes, then that person should have the permanent thing. This amendment was brought in this year. Earlier we gave temporary VAT for the if that import or export below the threshold, or if that item is exempted item, we allowed the temporary allowed import or export under the temporary VAT. However, in several cases we have identified that the taxpayers are misusing this method. So with the discussion of Parliament and the custom officials, it is decided to remove this temporary VAT process. If any person imports or export for the business purposes, and with the even though their threshold is lower than the current threshold, which is quarterly 15 million rupees and annually 60 million rupees, they have to take permanent registration.
Thank you very much. We have overshot the time, but anyway, let me open the Q&A session to the audience. So,
and we are now able to improve the domestic aviation in Sri Lanka. But I am really not sure whether you consulted any of the owners, operators who are in the front line. And we find that spares and fuel are still, we have to pay VAT on that. And as a result, we have to pass it down to the consumer. And the rates to places like Jaffna and popular places like Verité are prohibitive. So that's just one more, Manu, just the other problem is that when spares are imported, those days we could do it online and get it paid by credit card. Now it goes into a new big process, and these airplanes, which are very small in number, the airplanes on the ground, say at Ratpanana, waiting for the spare, and aircraft on ground is a loss. So these owners can't operate till the customs and import control and everything gets back. So it takes about a week before you can start the operation again. So I don't know whether we can do something about it. Thank you.
thank you.
At this stage, that's item number one. But in our view, still, despite the fact that certain hard choices have to be made, we have to look at the future. We need to make sure country is ready and is getting ready for the future. That's why investments are planned to expand the domestic airports, to provide that necessary infrastructure is being built, necessary infrastructure is being renovated, and keep them ready for in years to come. When the industry is ready to support that one, then the infrastructure is ready. It can't happen the other way around. So that's why the government has invested in the domestic airport structure. Second one, in relation to the efficiency that you are saying it has to go through a process. I'll give a classic example in a similar event earlier this year. I'm sure many of you would know Import-Export Controller General's office is now 100% online since 1st January 2025. We had some teething issues at the beginning of the year, but one of the forum participant mentioned, even though we have brought it 100% online, we still have to go there to visit the Import-Export Controller General's office to get some of the work done. So following week, on Monday, I made a surprise visit with an unannounced visit, I would say, to Import-Export Controller General's office to see whether people actually have to come into the office. And we had about 5 counters open which were used for in-person presence before, but all 5 counters were empty. Except in one counter there was a person who has come. This was Monday morning around 9:30, 10. And I went and spoke to that gentleman and asked, since services are available online, this is relevant to the industry that you asked, that's why I'm sharing this experience. Since services are available online, why did you come? And the gentleman who was on the queue, or there was no queue, he was the only person at the counter mentioned, the service is very late, as you mentioned also. And there's delays, that's why my office asked me to come to check why it is taking time, that's why I had to come all the way. Then I asked, for you to say it is late, when did you make the online application? This was Monday morning around 9:30. He mentioned himself, they have lodged the application Friday around 3 p.m. So he lodged the application Friday 3 p.m. and has come to Import-Export Controller General's office Monday at 9:30. It's only few hours, and yet it was considered as late. I was happy to an extent that businesses are seeking that level of efficiency from the government service. I explained to him, you lodged the application online Friday 3, now today at Monday 9:30 you are considering it's late. Why? Then he explained, there's a flight that is grounded, they have ordered some spare parts for brakes, and the flight has to take off, that's why the office wanted to come in person. So just want to elaborate. Processes are getting digitized, it's improving in terms of efficiency, and we are facilitating faster processing of these applications. I'll give a second example related to the airline industry. You mentioned that we have not consulted. I visited a Koggala free trade zone, BOI zone, where there's a factory that refurbishes aircrafts in Sri Lanka. Their sole business is they refurbishes smaller aircrafts in Sri Lanka. And when I went visited the factory again, the complaint from the owner was it takes a long time, the processes are delayed, and it takes, the traditional complaint, it takes a long time. This was somewhere perhaps in March or April once again. And I asked, can you give me an example when you generalize and say it takes a long time for the officers to process the application? He did not have an example, but he said, let me call my purchasing manager because he's giving me this excuse all the time when I ask for the parts. So he rang his purchasing manager and gave the phone to me. And I asked from that gentleman, your boss is saying the import-export department is very late. We are taking a long time to process. Again the same story, he said it's very long, lengthy process. I asked, how many days it takes for you in average to clear the spare parts that you are bringing in? He mentioned 3 days, which is a long time. Once again, I'm happy that businesses are expecting that level of efficiency. Then I asked from him, before 31st of December 2024, how long it took on average for you to clear the parts? He said 6 days. So from 31st of December to March, within 3 months, we have reduced the time it takes to clear on average from 6 days to 3 days. That is the efficiency improvement that we have provided. So these are some examples that I want to share. These are real information feedback that I hear from businesses. But I'm sure there are many ways that we need to improve. As you suggested, there are many areas that we can engage in consultation, talking to the industry, get the views and feedback from you all to see, as government, what can we do more in order to support you all. So we are open to hear your suggestions to OPA.
Sorry to interrupt, just a small suggestion, sir.
Be our procedures rigidity or our bureaucracy, so many other reasons. So now you said you're modernizing the system to reduce those burdens, so the allocations can be, utilized fully or at least 75%. Now, in that sense, have you done as a government any study as to why this has been happening for so long? And the mechanism, only the modernization you think would do it, or there are other improvements that you need to do to make that allocations to be utilized in a proper manner?
A statement, it is very catchy in the social media.
No, it's not.
But it is lack of substance. We stand by what we have as state officials, what we have prepared.
It's
every item provided and mentioned in the parliament, there's substance, there's provisions made, new allocations where necessary or existing allocation. So it's, I don't want to get into a debate. As I said, this can be very catchy for popularity in the social media. But in substance, state officials are accountable and liable if it is otherwise. So all those numbers are better, they are included, and those are substantial. That's item number one. Second one is a very practical question that you asked. Haven't we learned from the past? This has been the history. I gave some examples also. Below 50% in many of the years in terms of utilization. Yes, we have learned from the past. That's why the PIP process was brought in after doing those studies. One reason that was identified as why project implementations are low is because in the past many projects have started without doing proper feasibility studies. When the project, there's a criteria called project readiness. So allocations are made in the budget, but the land is not ready, ministry is not ready, department is not ready, So there were several challenges. So that's why currently it goes through a process. By 30th of May each year, ministries and departments supposed to submit their project proposals, so that is well in advance to the budget. By 30th of the May of the current year, they are supposed to submit their proposals for capital expenditure. That is the PIP, the project pipeline. And then a committee, special committee will review those in terms of readiness, environmental impact assessment, feasibility is available, the economic impact of these projects. It goes through a process. That's why it has to be submitted well in advance. After going through those selection criteria, then projects are ranked and prioritized, and only those ones that are suitable will be selected. So the whole idea is to ensure it will get fully utilized in the following year when the budget is being allocated. So there are measures that have been adopted. I'm sure we will see the results in the near future, in years to come. But our expectation will we will continue to learn, and we will introduce those learnings into the process to ensure budgets are fully utilized. Because it is the capital investment that will pay dividends in the following years in terms of the availability of infrastructure for businesses to make use of them, etc. So our view is those improvements that we have brought into the process will pay dividends in years to come. Thank you. To improve the system. So that is the money that you pay. You mentioned citizens pay 36 and corporates pay 30. Those are the money that we collected and invested wisely, very carefully, and with lot of responsibility to make sure every rupee that we collect is invested for the best return for citizens, for the best return for the country. And for the first part of your question relating to the rates differences, I'm sure given the situation that we are in as a nation, we have to continue this journey for a while to make sure we collect. Our interest cost is very high as a country because of the way how we have borrowed recklessly in the past, unfortunately. And those borrowings have been utilized for non-productive assets and investments. So I'm sure when you travel across the country, you will see many abandoned buildings, half-built projects, some projects completed but never used for the full potential that it was expected, etc. So because of those activities, we are burdened. Current generations and many future generations are burdened to service. So our intention is to not to repeat those mistakes in the past. I need your support as citizens and professionals to take this message across to the rest of the community, to support the government to continue this journey. When the right is time, I'm sure we can relook at those tax structures. But in the current moment, our ambition is to make wise investments and best use of the taxpayers' money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, make it very short.
Short question. Revenues of the government from this budget, how confident are we on the debt obligations and repayment starting from 2028 without going back to another short-term borrowing cycle? And also we saw some of the similar countries which export this type of crisis went through few restructuring again. So what's the view on that? I think Mr. Karunaratne can address on it, and then we can hear from the Dr. Harshana.
That then probably Dr. Suriyapperuma can explain in detail. Now, if you look at the numbers we had 2022 in terms of debt to GDP is around 140%. Now, we are on a clear path with the IMF. So, target by 2032 is to bring it down to 95%. But as per the budget speech made by the Honorable President, the target is to bring it less than 90%. So that's a very good sign. Then, how we are going to pay the debt? Now, when we talk about debt, there are two types of debt, the domestic and foreign. Now, even in this, as far as we don't build foreign debt, anyway, domestic debt we can manage through our own currency. But the question on the debt is the foreign debt. Now, look at the current budget, out of 1.75 trillion deficit, the government is to borrow through, for instance, only 453 billion. So that's a good sign. 85% coming from the domestic sources. Like any crisis, the restructuring the foreign debt, especially the sovereign debt, is the difficult part. Because when you pay foreign debt, bilateral, multilateral, and sovereign, which is very painful. And if we keep on this path, because this is the first time in the history of the world, this macro-linked monetary issue. So which is based on certain targets the government achieves. So again, there are, if we meet certain revenue and other targets, so again, we will get some benefit in terms of interest costs. So those are good. On the other hand, if you look at the reserves, in the history, our reserves have been built up not internally but through borrowings. So it's like you build a house through a bank loan. On one side you have asset, on the other side you have a liability, right? We have to look at the reserves now. We came to a bare minimum of about 20 billion, other than the SOP, Chinese SOP, which was not usable, but it has gone up to about 4.8, without Chinese SOP. So it's a remarkable improvement over the last 3 years, which is all debt. The reserves created internally through remittances, tourism flows and export or whatever flows. So that's a good sign. So I think we should have an ability to build up that reserves, and also there are some targets from the IMF on India. So far it has been, quite successful, but there is no, I think, GOR target, but it's a benchmark line. The people are worried about that, but there is no such target. And so 6.5 billion is a quite comfortable target. And if we continue on this path, definitely I don't see, as Steve also said previously, meeting the initial payments beginning 2020, it's about 3.4 billion, around 3.4 billion in USD terms, which is very comfortable. And also the period of repayment expand over a number of years. So only the important fact is we should not build up foreign debts continuously, especially for unproductive works. So that is the problem. So we don't have any repayment capacity. So if we follow this path, definitely I don't think any problem of government meeting the targets. And also the government plan, it's a good sign that going to be below 90%, I think much better than the targets even. And so I don't see any risk on repayment. But only thing is we cannot make any judgment on the external vulnerabilities. Because I think the major remittance, the major inflows are coming from the remittance of tourism, which is subject to certain external vulnerabilities, which we don't have any control. But what is important is build up of exports. I think that's a good sign in the government budget to build up exports on trade facilitation. Because if you look at the Vietnam, we were high in terms of export about 25 years ago, and trade facilitation is in par with. Now their export around 2023 is about 89%, 90% of the GDP, whereas our is about near 20%. I think they mentioned we target about 30%. Right? So at one time the exports have grown even above the GDP. And also some studies done on the trade facilitation, which is very important in the current budget. We are below even Cambodia in certain trade facilitation indexes. Right? So Vietnam, so if you look at they have done a cobweb sort of analysis on different factors of trade facilitation. So that is what we must do. So our focus should be on enhanced export. So we should have a target. We should build reserves through exports, then definitely I think we don't have any problem of meeting the target, even subject to those vulnerabilities arising from remittances.
Thank you, Dr. Would you like to add a quick?
I think a very comprehensive answer was provided by Karunaratne, so I don't have to add much. But just to give some numbers, in 2024, we have served $1.67 billion. In 25, it is 2.4 billion. And in 2028, it's about 3.25 billion. So compared to the funds that we have already served, it's about only 800 million. And we are very confident based on the trajectory and the path that we have taken and the discipline into the financial structure that we have brought in. We are very confident we should be able to meet those targets.
Thank you, Dr. Suriyapperuma. May I thank all the panelists, Dr. Suriyapperuma.
To Mr. Barney, who is the moderator of today's evening, and thank you for the speakers and also other resource persons and also participants who have been engaged in an enriching discussion today. So time is up. We are almost talking 9 p.m. So this is it is my duty to call a head table, including Mr. Jayantha, President of the OPA. Invite Dr. Harshana, Secretary to the Treasury, Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Thank you, sir. To receive his token of appreciation, may I invite Mr. J.P.R. Karunaratne, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank. Ms. Iyesha, Asanthi, Commissioner, Tax Policy and Legislation, Department of Inland Revenue. Thank you for participating. And thankfully, Dr. Nishan who had just joined. Please receive your token of appreciation from the OPA. Thank you very much, the head table of the OPA. Ladies and gentlemen, to come.
Thank you, Shamil. We came to the end of this family topic seminar. So as a General Secretary, this is my duty to give the vote of thanks. President Mr. Jayantha, President-elect Mr. Tisilla, Treasurer Mr. Darshana Vijayamanga, immediate past President Mr. Suchivalal Danayaka, past Presidents, Office Bearers, ESCO and Forum members of the OPA, distinguished guest speakers, ladies and gentlemen. We have just concluded a very important post-budget seminar on impact of the budget on the national economy, the way forward, organized by the Organization of Professional Association of Sri Lanka. This seminar has provided us with valuable insight into the measures proposed in 2026 budget to advance the national economy. As representative of the country's professional community, understanding those development is essential. Consequently, I am sure this has been truly productive and worthwhile evening. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our keynote speaker, Dr. Harshana Suriyapperuma, Secretary to the Treasury and Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, as well as our speakers, Mr. J.P.R. Karunaratne, former Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Ms. Iyesha Asanthi, Commissioner of the Tax Policy and Legislations, Department of Inland Revenue, and Dr. Nishan, Director, Verité Research, for joining us this evening. Thank you, sir, for your participation. I know there are many demands on your time and sincerely appreciate your presence here today. We have all benefited greatly from your expertise and views. I would like to extend my gratitude to President Mr. Jayanta Galleva, President-elect Mr. Tisri Disilla, Treasurer Mr. Darshana Vijayaman for their leadership and guidance. My appreciation goes to moderator of today's programs, OPA Vice President Mr. Banu Vijayaratne. Thank you, Mr. Banu. I also must acknowledge support provided by the Central Director and the staff of the OPA. Finally, I would like to commend the audience for your active participation in the Q&A sessions. So now I would like to invite everyone to join for the dinner in our restaurants. Thank you very much.